management programs. Our key message today is to make sure that you take ownership of your waste management program. It's not your vendor's program to run, it's yours. So hopefully we inspire you to take some initiative and drive the effectiveness of your program. Hopefully the audience, and from the list I breezed through this morning, I think most of you are kind of either in these groups or wearing these hats amongst others. EH&S folks focusing on reducing waste and liability. Facility managers looking to things to do to manage their waste streams and waste management program more efficiently. And then, of course, procurement folks who are looking to reduce costs and reduce spend. Hopefully we can give each of you some advice and some information to use. We're going to start it with a little poll question of how often do you review your waste management program? Is it never, every couple of years? We do it annually, whether we like it or not, or something we do quarterly. You'll see that there's a poll open now where you can kind of give us some insight as to how often you're doing these things. Obviously, the answer to your question depends on the size of your program to determine the frequency that makes the most sense. If you have 2 waste streams that you have been generating for the past 10 years, there's probably not a whole lot to review. But if you're a larger institution or corporation that's generating 200 waste streams and there are constant changes in your waste generation processes, you're probably assessing your program more frequently.
So we'll give everyone a few more seconds to answer that question, and we'll go over the results there. Okay, Mike, so it looks like about 60% review their program annually, followed by 20% every couple of years and 15% quarterly.
Okay, well, hopefully we can drive more of you folks towards the quarterly or more frequently. I think there's always opportunities for improvement, and for those of you that's been every couple of years, it may be the case that you're in that boat where you don't generate a whole lot of complex waste streams, or the situations just don't change that frequently, and that may be adequate for you. But without knowing individual specifics, it's tough to address. But a fresh set of eyes and a fresh look at the programs always seem to generate some good ideas. So hopefully with the rest of the slides, we can give you some good ideas of things to look for. So typically when I go out and do a review with some clients, or from what clients tell me what they look at when they do a review, is first thing first, they look at waste profiles, making sure they're accurate, making sure that they're organized, and it's not something that just sits in a binder on the shelf for years on end. Obviously, you can focus your research into the volumes. Obviously, the bigger volumes get the bigger amount of attention. And then taking a deeper dive into where does the cost come associated with these waste generation processes. Is it labor on site to manage the waste streams, or is it the containers because you're using lots of small containers, or maybe an inappropriate type of container for the type of waste you're generating? Is it the disposal technology that drives the cost? You know, you're incinerating something that could be managed in a less costly manner. So we're going to explore some of that stuff today. And then, of course, the composition of the waste stream. Is there something about the waste stream that drives the costs? Say, for example, you have an acid stream that's got sulfuric and phosphoric acid, but it's got small amounts of hydrofluoric acid. Obviously, hydrofluoric acid in any concentration is going to drive cost up for handling, the risks associated. And if you could segregate it or eliminate that, you'd significantly reduce your costs. Again, that's driven off of waste profiles a lot of times, so the exercise of assessing if your waste profiles are accurate drives the cost efficiencies of your program. So you might be thinking already, well, if I open up more changes, I may be increasing my long-term liability. Well, it's true that you have to manage your cradle-to-grave liability. You can do that by doing your due diligence in the companies you're using, facilities you're using, their technology, and just vetting the process. Some of you might be thinking, I don't have the space to make changes during some of these things I'm going to suggest. You don't need a warehouse in order to make an efficient waste management program. we've reorganized areas as small as a broom closet to just streamline the handling and maximize the efficiencies with the program. Some of you are wearing 10 different hats. You know, the second or third slide there where I talked about the different groups, you may be that one person wearing all those hats at your site. And you're thinking, when am I going to have the time to get this done? Well, you know, you're not alone in that sense. There's always folks like us or your current vendor or maybe some other members of your staff that you can motivate to help you out that are interested in greening and reducing waste volumes. Lastly, you know, some of you want to get going on making your waste management program better, but need to involve other departments in the decision-making and implementation process. I guess my piece of advice would be to show them the benefits, show them the cost benefits, show them the environmental benefits, and I think that the more people understand the opportunities, the gains of what you're trying to implement, the more likely you're going to get help and less kind of obstructions or objections to maybe getting more space or getting some more help or doing things a little bit differently, or people just have good ideas for brainstorming on how to manage things differently. So always good to get a group involved versus a one-man army trying to change the whole program. Again, you know, this whole thing is to motivate you to take ownership of your program. It's a lot of times I see people that you know, they submit an inventory or a new waste profile to us or somebody else, and we say, well, here's what we're going to do with it, whether it be fuel blending, for example. I think the best managers of environmental programs tend to ask why. Why are you managing it this way? And not so much just to question us, but more to understand what are the options that we evaluated. You know, are there other options out there that they may want to look at? There may be people that are you know, more risk adverse and want to manage something one way, or folks that are looking to save some money and are open to some other suggestions. So I'd encourage you to always ask your provider, you know, why are you managing certain streams certain ways, or why do my pickups, for example, happen at certain times of the day, or is there something we can be doing differently to improve the program? So just on a quick kind of agenda, so the things we want to talk about today is some ideas to reduce waste, some ideas around managing your program better to squeeze some efficiency, and then of course reducing spend. All these three topics are kind of interchangeable, and I'm going to talk about them kind of interchangeably throughout the presentation. So we'll get started. Obviously, reducing waste, the biggest opportunity is to not generate the waste in the first place. If you're not generating the waste in the first place and you can somehow eliminate it from your production process or your research process, you're in a whole better place. Determining the source of the waste generation. I see a lot of times that companies are collecting waste and it comes from multiple sources, but there's probably 3 or 4 people involved, and no one person can kind of outline the whole process of the waste generation. And sometimes in order to eliminate a waste, you've got to really understand how do you get to that point in the first place. The more you understand about the process, the more you can make educated decisions about going a different route. Another big one, ensuring that the waste determination was made correctly. We see plenty of examples where a waste determination was made based on a vendor's recommendation or maybe on an inventory that was submitted years ago, and the process may have changed, something may have been incorrectly categorized. Always good to kind of get a second QA/QC of all of your waste determination processes. Something that inspectors look at, you know, heavily when they come in, and something the more you can be on point with knowing your waste generation processes thoroughly, the better off you are. And then, of course, you know, sometimes a small contaminant makes a bigger mess, especially in the case of listed waste would come to mind. If you've got a listed waste that's going into a larger non-hazardous or characteristic volume, you've got a listed waste throughout. If you can segregate out that process generating the listed waste from the rest of the collection, obviously you can reduce your volumes, reduce your costs, because listed waste treatment tends to be more expensive. Not always, but tends to be more expensive than some characteristic or obviously non-hazardous wastes. So figuring ways to avoid the waste in the first place, obviously the best option. Of course, if you can't eliminate it, is there a substitution opportunity for changing up what you're doing? In the past, I don't know, 10 years or so, there's been huge progress in what we call green chemistry, where there's been plenty of substitutions for what was once effective but is determined to have been toxic or generates a lot of hazardous waste. For example, PCBs, asbestos, and lead paint worked great for years, but we've realized that the downside with the toxic effects of those things, we had to move along. We've made lots of progress in things that come to mind like degreasing and parts cleaning and other solvents used for cleaning into non-toxic or non-characteristic kind of options. Plenty of them out there, so if you've been using something that's hazardous for a decade or 5 years and it's just the one we've been using forever and nobody's looked at it, take another look at it, see what's out there on the market. Reach out to some of your colleagues and see if they've found another option. There's plenty of them out there. And then a lot of times we see volumes of huge volumes of waste for pretty simple processes where people are using the big volume to do small amounts of work. For example, in like the parts cleaning kind of option, if it takes 100 gallons to clean a couple of parts, but you could use something of a stronger strength that would clean the part just as effectively, could you switch to that stronger strength and produce 10 gallons of waste versus 100? A lot of those options exist out there for stronger products, non-toxic, biodegradable, and so on. So I'd encourage you to look for some of those. And we have plenty of recommendations where we've substituted products to take people out of a RCRA and into a non-hazardous waste generation. And then, of course, if you can't eliminate it, and even if you may have substituted, is there an opportunity to recycle the waste that you're generating? A lot of times you can reintroduce the waste into another process in your corporation. See if another department could use your waste as a feedstock for the process. We see sodium hydroxide used in kind of reactor vessels, but then it's disposed of. Well, that sodium hydroxide isn't really heavily contaminated and could maybe be used in a wastewater process for pH neutralization, for example. A lot of times there's material that's off-spec for the process that it's originally used for, but maybe a little simple filtering or drying or separation of some water or something would let you reintroduce some fraction of the material back into the original process or into another one on your site. We see this a lot with those of you that are in the life sciences or pharmaceutical or biotech companies, FDA-regulated environments where they are very strict about reuse products and certificates of analysis and so on, where you can't use it in the manufacturing process, but you're producing a near virgin chemical after use, a spent solvent or a spent corrosive cleaner or something. That could most certainly be used by another industry or even another part of your plant. We see a lot of industrial solvents, for example, that are used in a reaction. The reaction takes place. They go to make the next batch of material, and they flush the reactor and the lines with a high purity solvent. If the reactors and lines have been drained sufficiently when they're collecting their product, there's really not a lot of material in there to contaminate that virgin line flush. The downside is that a lot of times I see that the leftover product gets mixed with that virgin line flush, and the whole thing is wasted and sent for fuel blending. If you separated out that line flush material, that reactor or vessel cleaning or the glass wash solvent or something like that, you'd see two bottles that look nearly identical, and you'd need a GC to tell you that there's contaminants in there. Those things are commodities. I mean, those are clean chemicals that can be reused and shouldn't be just wasted. And then obviously one of the best sources of methods for managing these kind of recycling opportunities is look at your competitors. If they're manufacturing a similar product and they have a similar process to do that manufacturing, chances are they're looking at the same opportunities to reduce cost and reduce volumes of hazardous waste. Look on social media. There's groups on sites like LinkedIn for industry-specific or chemical-specific. There's plenty of opportunities out there with good information. Just give you some brainstorming ideas of people that might be interested in your reusing your material. And of course, we have tons of experience in this process, and would be happy to look at specifics and see what we can do. Moving on to some of the efficient management ideas. Like I said, again, some of these things are interlinked, so I'm kind of talking interchangeably about the reducing waste and reducing spend at the same time, and through efficiency to do that. This one shouldn't be a big reveal to anybody. The economy of scale. Small containers cost more, and they cost more because of the additional material handling, the processing and sampling, and the transportation. Once that leaves your site, all these things have to be handled again. They have to be processed, and when you're working in smaller batches, it's more time and labor intensive. This graphic isn't to say that you've got to take your lab pack material and get it into a tanker load. You don't have the volume for something like that. You may not have the volume, but it's just kind of a reminder that if you're generating a lot of one of these categories for lab packs or loose packs or bulk drums, for example, what would it take you to get into a more efficient and like a kind of a next level kind of collection method? If the volume's not there, the opportunity might not be there. But if the volume is there, something you should be looking at. And then that last little point on the bottom there, the recommendation for pack as you go, is kind of a management strategy that we use a lot in places that don't have a lot of space, that are generating a lot of small containers. Small containers with lots of hazardous waste labels attract attention from inspectors and regulators. If you can manage the efficiency of all those containers by combining into one drum and compliantly storing it, you take some of that risk off the shelf literally off the shelf of having all those small bottles, having it all visible and available for inspection. It takes the time out of lab packing. Whatever would churn like a 3-day, 3-person team lab pack. If you're doing more pack as you go, you can turn it less of an event into more of a routine kind of just drum pickup kind of opportunity. Saves time for you and management, saves time for the lab pack crew, ultimately saves you money and reduce the kind of risk for inspections. Space constraints. Like I said, back at the beginning of the presentation, you don't need an entire warehouse to make yourself an efficient program and cost-effective program. There's cost advantages to shipping less frequently. Obviously, if you have the space to store drums, you ship less, it costs less. A lot of times you have people objecting to giving you additional space for waste management because it's more of a cost center. They're focused on giving the space required to bring revenue in the door. But I think back to forming your team to implement some of these changes, show the cost savings to the group. Here's why I'm asking for this additional space. Here's why I'm asking for the ventilation to consolidate solvents. Here's why I need the grounding straps. Here's why I need the fume hood installed for our space. The more the people understand it, the more likely you get to space. The more you have the space, the more options you have for managing an efficient program. Main accumulation areas for hazardous waste are generally the last thing on a facilities manager's mind. You have to keep the people bringing money in the door happy in the first place, and then you're kind of usually forced to figure out what you have left for space for waste management. I'm looking out the window right now at Cambridge, and some of the most prestigious institutions in the world have hundreds of thousands of square feet that generate lots of waste from R&D and from manufacturing, and the spaces that they've dedicated to waste management are inadequate, to say the least. If the design was done from the beginning, it'd be a lot more opportunities for improving programs. So just try to stake your ground, and I guess is what I'm trying to say, when you are trying to build out a new facility or maybe moving or have the opportunity to grab some ground. Again, this is similar to the last slide, but design one with the end in mind. This does not only the space, but kind of maybe a collection process. If you're generating larger volumes, is there a better means to do the collection that takes the safety risk out of the handling, that takes the labor and time involved with the handling and lessens that too. I was just at a site yesterday where the labs generate the majority of the waste in small containers. Small containers then go down to the basement where there's a main accumulation area where they get collected. The safety cans, which I'm sure you've all seen for solvents, go over to another area where they have the adequate ventilation and so on for bulking the material, but that's a small area as well. Then the bulk containers go to a fourth area where they're stored so they can get the kind of the economy of scale of shipping larger volumes at once. All of that's a great idea as far as having the abilities to do all those things, but if you could do it all in one spot and eliminate triple, quadruple handling of containers, you obviously save a lot of time and effort and labor cost to do it. So think it through when you're building out a new space or if you're moving. Where's the waste coming from, and how can I get close to it with enough space to manage it efficiently? The picture, just for the record, is not one of our trucks, but we run into these urban environments on a regular basis, and I can see one from where I'm sitting now, where the main accumulation area for a large quantity generator is behind a low bridge where we can't get a truck to it. So there's double handling involved with a smaller truck has got to come out and move the material out to a spot where we can transfer it onto a larger truck. Again, these things are obvious things, but things that people should really think through when you're setting up your program. Reducing spend, always a crowd favorite. You can reduce your spend, a lot of cases, through what you have for options. We see lots of streams that people are managing conservatively. I guess the message is you can still be conservative and risk adverse, or and still cost effective. There's always the misconception that RCRA incineration is the end all be all and you've got no liability. It's not true. I mean, you've got cradle to grave liability no matter what kind of management method you're using. In comparing the kind of the hierarchy of cost and some people think of it as risk, if you've got incineration versus fuel blending, there's pros and cons to both of those. Some are more flexible and accepting in the case of like incineration versus fuel blending is more stringent, but you've got lesser long-term liability. RCRA incineration of non-haz, I mean, we see people doing that all the time. Some people think that I've got a truck that's leaving with 60 drums. If the truck's already going with all that material for RCRA incineration, why don't I just put the non-hazardous materials or materials that can be managed at a different technology? If I just put them on that truck, there's really not that much additional cost. Well, you could segregate those things and probably look at some other options that could certainly reduce your cost. Fuel blending versus recycling. I mentioned it a couple times in some of the examples in previous slides with solvents that are getting commingled and going for fuel blending that really shouldn't. There's so much fuel that gets wasted versus, or I shouldn't say wasted, but just goes for energy recovery versus something that could be a commodity potentially and at least in the minimal sense recycled. And then I see a lot of people that are landfill adverse or have no landfill goals or trying to minimize landfill materials that are wastewater treating material. If you've got a wastewater treatment or a wastewater treat type stream, acids, corrosives, listed waste, whatever it may be, that's got high percentages of solids, I don't think this is a mystery to anybody, but in reality, you're filtering those solids out of the wastewater system and you're landfilling. You're stabilizing and landfilling that material after the fact. So it may be that you're trying to take advantage of what you think is a lesser liability treatment option, but in fact, you still get the same risk downstream with the process. Sometimes it may be better to go direct to the end disposal option rather than those intermediary steps that just add cost and really don't eliminate the risk. Again, you know, I'm speaking generically about these technology options because I don't know everybody on the webinar's individual waste streams. We can certainly look at them and we can talk these things through in greater detail. They give you kind of the pros and cons of each of the technologies and how they'd affect cost and what your options would be. One of the, I guess, the biggest bang for your buck in reducing spend and reducing your waste generation is through solvent recovery. Some people may be thinking on the call that, oh, I don't have huge volumes, so solvent recovery may not be for me. We've got some benchtop stills that are recycling 10, 15 gallons a day. We've also got the other end of the spectrum, you know, where there's thousands of gallons a day that get recycled. I guess the message is to just, the options open to everybody, and take a look at what you've got, and you know, we can explore the options. The pros around solvent recovery, depending on where you are in the state environmental program, if they've adopted the change in definition of the solid waste program, you may be able to take advantage of some relaxed management rules around solvents that are being tolled or recycled, whether that be on-site or off-site. Obviously, solvent recovery is probably your lowest cost solvent management option. If you can get into a recovery program, it's generally cheaper than any kind of fuel blending or obviously incineration management method. The downside on solvent recovery is you may be left with an expensive sludge. It may be the case that your material is in a solvent solution for a reason. You take out the solvent and it polymerizes into a rock-hard cement. You obviously don't want that to happen because you end up with a much more expensive residual to handle. And the other downside with solvent recovery is, in some cases, depending on what the solvent is being used for on the back end, they may have very low tolerances. If, for example, if you've got a halogenated solvent like a methylene chloride that's being reclaimed to be resold as methylene chloride, you know, they've got lower tolerances for something like THF being in there, harder to separate because of boiling points and so on. But if that methylene chloride is being used as part of a paint stripper program, it's probably got some more tolerance for some contaminants, and you may still be able to get into a program. Again, it's all kind of a case-by-case evaluation of what you have and what you can do, but these are just kind of some food for thoughts of, hey, let me take a look and see what I have and see what options are out there for it. Waste energy. Everybody, I think, has seen headlines around no landfill goals and some of the major corporations out there with achieving zero landfill at sites across North America and such. Waste energy is a great option for non-recyclable, non-hazardous materials. The good news is if you're on the East Coast, there's lots of capacity and lots of options. There's capacity on the West Coast too. In the Midwest, you're a little bit more kind of sparse, and transportation costs may make it a little bit less attractive. A lot of things that have driven the waste energy volumes in the past, 10 years has been kind of the emergence of a truly global market, and people seeing things churn up on the gray market, things that you disposed of 10 years ago that somebody picked out of a landfill somewhere, or somebody stuffed into a sea can overseas that turns up on eBay. With waste energy, you have that peace of mind of knowing that the material has been destroyed, and you don't have to worry about the long-term liability of products ending up there that you intended to dispose of. In some of the certifications you see out there around no landfill or zero landfill, they actually do have some allowances, depending on the program, where up to 10% of your volume of your non-hazardous waste could be going to a waste energy program. Again, it varies by program in the certifying body, but there's some material that you can't divert into a reuse or recycling program, that this may be the best option for it. Along the same lines of making sure that you've diverted all your good stuff away from the stuff that can't be recycled or reused, look at your waste products as a potential source of revenue. Look at it as a source of as a commodity. First one that comes to mind, and kind of in the graphic there, is like an oily water mixture. There's countless places I can think of where they've got 75% oil and 25% of coolants, all in the same drum or the same tank or whatnot. And if they separated those things, they'd be reducing their cost and potentially have a commodity. Granted, oil's trading at $38 a barrel today, and I filled up last night for $2.09 a gallon and had the urge to drive to Canada because I could afford it. So oil may not be the best example as a commodity of making you money or saving you a bunch of money, but this applies to any kind of waste stream. If there's a small contaminant in there that's getting in there because of commingling and not because it's part of the process generating the waste that you couldn't possibly separate, see if you can separate it out there and see what the options are that are out there to reuse it or remarket it or use it somewhere else in your own facility. Splitting of phases and commingling is just kind of what I just described. If there's phases of or steps of a process that generate different waste streams, what would it change if I collected these things separately? You may come to the conclusion that if I collected them separately, it would cost me more. Unlikely, but if you did, what options are out there? This is another one that's obviously a no-brainer to anybody on the call. Time is money, and that applies to your internal management of your program and your vendors, whether it be us or anybody else. Is a drum pickup or a lab pack an event? Try and make it streamlined so it's not an event. Does the driver or the environmental specialist show up and have to hunt down the person that knows what's in the drums and what drums are going to be shipped, or how they're going to be managed, or so on? If that's the case, then there's room for improvement. Clear labeling, pre-printed labels. If I can walk into a main accumulation area and I know exactly what's in the room, I know exactly what's going, it turns it in from a couple hours of labor and kind of detective work into a routine kind of process. Easy access to the site. I know I've hit on it a couple times and it sounds like it's a no-brainer, but don't. You want to be able to put a larger truck into the site. Costs of transportation are huge. I mean, like I said, the price of gas and diesel are down, but that won't last forever. We all know that. Inventory systems. We see a lot of chemical inventory systems that are used in the laboratory for receiving and distribution throughout a campus. But then it seems to hit a cliff where it falls off when the materials waste, the inventory kind of disappears. That doesn't have to be the case. A lot of these inventory systems certainly have the capability, and we're familiar with, I'd say, half a dozen that we see on a regular basis that have the capability to inventory your waste management or your waste inventory, whether that be in satellite accumulation areas or in your main accumulation area. Those inventory systems make it easier for you to communicate what's there to fire department, your waste provider. If somebody sends us an inventory to our customer service folks, it makes it very simple for scheduling pickups, making sure that we've got adequate supplies. These are all kind of simple tasks that just over-communicating makes the process and the system just that much more efficient. Again, time is money. The less time it takes for everybody involved, the more you can get on to addressing the things that are underneath the 9 other hats that you may be wearing. So again, the whole point is to inspire you guys to take ownership of your program, take another look, dust off that binder on the shelf, flip through the profiles, ask some questions, ask why, ask the folks in the labs or ask the folks in manufacturing, why are we generating this waste? Could we be doing it differently? Could we eliminate it? Could we substitute it? Could we recycle it? Just ask the questions and see what you get for answers. There's no harm in asking. So as far as a follow-up and kind of an action plan going forward is schedule a review. I use a simple system to schedule kind of reviews for anything I'm responsible for. Put it in Outlook. The reminder pops up on a regular basis, gets it in your face, and if it's in sight, it's not out of mind. If it's a binder on a shelf with 500 other binders just collecting dust, it's not likely to get done. Educate the folks. Like I said before, brainstorming with a larger group, sharing with the other stakeholders involved why you're doing this, and soliciting their input, it makes the process all that much more robust and more likely to succeed. Implementation, again, goes back to that kind of education part. If there's more people involved and more people you have buy-in from, implementation goes a lot smoother and easier. And then, of course, don't put the binder back on the shelf. Look at it on a regular basis. Make sure that you're doing this, even though it may seem a tedious task. If you don't have a whole lot of waste streams, there's not a whole complexity to your waste management program, it doesn't hurt to take another look. And take the look and come up with options that are available. With that, we'll open up to questions.
Great, thank you, Mike. That was a very informative presentation. We've got a few questions coming in already. So we will transition now into that question and answer portion of the webinar. I encourage those of you with a question for Mike to go ahead and type it into that questions pane on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll do our best to get to all of those. So let's start with a couple that have come in already. Someone is asking about solvent streams and wants to know, if I have a solvent stream, what does it take to evaluate them or that stream for recycling?
So typically with a solvent stream, we're looking for information about the waste profile and the process generating. From there, we can kind of look at what options are there, how we could potentially clean it up, and then as far as getting it physically, chemically reviewed, we'd take some samples of the material, get it out to some of the recycling facilities or reuse options, and have them evaluated for reuse in their process. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward process.
Great, and you mentioned, you talked a bit about inventory systems. So someone asks if you have any specific recommendations for an inventory system or technology.
No, like I said, as far as inventory systems, chemical inventory systems, we see probably half a dozen that are out there as far as the receiving and kind of laboratory chemical inventory. We have our own system that we use for kind of waste management advice. It's a web-based program you can have access to 24/7, and it ties together all the waste management information like waste profiles and manifests and inventories for individual areas. You can drill down to the satellite and the main accumulation areas as to real-time volumes. So it's a pretty robust system.
Thanks for that explanation. And we have a question here about waste vendors and profiles. Someone notes that I had a waste vendor who would export one of my profiles out of the country. Should my company avoid exporting waste to out-of-country TSDFs for cost purposes?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I know that there's some folks that strictly restrict any disposal or recycling outside of the states, but again, it goes back to the risk of doing your due diligence. Do they have export notices in place for your waste streams? That whole process goes through EPA, and I'm assuming you're talking about Canada, Environment Canada. They approve and review all those waste streams to make sure that person has, or that company has, those notices in place. And you can always review the back end of where it's going. I mean, and to some extent, depending on where you're going, over the border, there is actually reduced long-term liability. For example, like Quebec doesn't have a Superfund type of or circular type of liability. So once the material is received at certain facilities in Quebec, they take ownership, and in some cases the province of Quebec is actually taking ownership in the long-term liability for the material once it's been placed in the landfill or received at the facility. So again, there's some misconceptions of lesser standards and that it's a riskier thing to do, but it may not be the case. So I'd encourage you to look at the individual people shipping and the receiving facility.
Okay, good advice. Our next question states, is the process you described for evaluating solvent streams for recycling a service that's provided by Triumvirate?
Yeah, that's something I personally do and my team does on a daily basis. We encourage you to reach out to myself or whoever at Triumvirate to discuss further. We can talk about how we would go about evaluating those solvents.
Cool, thank you, Mike. We have a question here from Bob. Can you give any idea of the types of savings you found in evaluating customers' waste situations? How much impact might a customer expect in having this sort of a review?
You know what? It's very specific on what you're generating. Obviously, volumes, and what you're spending now, how you're managing it, what treatment technology, what options we can come up with. I mean, I've seen some that have slashed budgets in half. That solvent A and solvent B line flush example that I gave during the presentation, that took over half of a company's waste generation from a recurrent incineration into a solvent recycling kind of commodity situation. So they saw huge savings in the management and the ultimate cost of their entire program. Again, it varies on a case-by-case basis, but we're always looking to explore the options with somebody and show you what's out there.
Right, and that's a great benefit of what can be achieved, so good example there. Rudy asks, how often does the EPA inspect your facility, and are we labeling the waste correctly?
So inspections for our facilities vary by the facility. Typically, in New England, we see them at least annually from the state and federal regulators. Mid-Atlantic more frequently. It all depends by the facility. And, of course, they're always subject to random surprise inspections. And then as far as labeling waste correctly, honestly, to answer that question, I'd have to see an example and understand what you're generating to really answer that. But as I would say, there's labeling to be compliant, and there's labeling to convey information and make it easier. There's some labeling things we use to identify where material is going for the drivers and the environmental specialists on site, so it makes it easier as far as the loading and piece counts and kind of just the handling of waste streams.
Sure, and we can follow up with this person and get a better idea of their specific situation.
Okay.
We can better address that. So another question, can you further describe how a site can perform pack-as-you-go on their own?
Sure. It's a kind of a training process to kind of make your site staff or yourself more into a kind of environmental specialist / field chemist. A lot of times pack-as-you-go programs work best when we have somebody that's collecting lots of small containers of similar type materials, not a very technical kind of lab pack situation, but something where it's got a lot of small containers, where we can direct how you can pack those materials and inventory the materials like a lab pack. For all essential purposes, it is a lab pack. It's just how to do that yourself or do that with our folks on site to kind of reduce the overall burden of managing those small containers.
Got it. And back to TSDF. So Robert wants to know, I have to perform a vendor quality audit of a new TSDF. can you provide guidance as to what type of things he should be looking for when performing this audit?
Sure, absolutely. I'd say reach out to me directly, and I can give you some examples of what we do when we do our own internal auditing of our facilities and third-party facilities that we use. Kind of the broad sweep of different areas: financial, safety, regulatory, kind of operations, those kind of categories, and then how we dive deeper into the whole assessment.
Good, great, and yeah, we'll see if he needs anything more specific there.
Sure.
We also have a couple of questions related to regulatory requirements. That's always a hot button topic with a lot of these issues. So, is there anything unique or any regulatory requirements that are unique to solvent recovery and waste to energy, for instance, and how do these play a role in those methods?
Right. In the solvent recovery world especially, like I said, it depends on the state you're in and as far as what the state has adopted as far as federal regulations. When they redefined the solid waste several years ago, it relaxed the rules of managing solvent waste that are being recycled, either closed loop on site or off site, like kind of tolling and not even tolling, but recycled it into another process. The regulations of how you have to store and label and time frames, and kind of gets you a little bit outside of the traditional RCRA management. Waste to energy, it's again, all that stuff is non-hazardous materials, so it's obviously not as stringent of management methods and time frames, etc. But again, if you reach out with kind of what waste streams you're looking at, and we can kind of dive into what options are available to you where you're located.
Great, and so it looks like that's the majority of our questions. I think we'll give it a couple of more minutes to see if there's anything remaining as we approach the top of the hour. But Mike, as we do that, do you have any sort of closing statements or things to keep in mind? We addressed some next steps. But what should someone do with this information, right, as they get back to their desk or their office today, and what would you recommend as far as a plan moving forward over the next couple of months?
If you can't get to it today, just like I said, put it in your Outlook calendar or whatever system you're using to just schedule the review, whether it be yourself or with your vendor or with some colleagues. Just get it on the calendar for a to-do. Like I said, dust off that binder with the profiles in it, or the manifest copies, or whatever kind of waste generation records you have, and see what the trends are. See what's going up. See what's declined. See why. Ask why. Ask why is this costing us more? Ask why are we generating more? Why can't we recycle this? Ask those questions, and that will drive the rest of the whole kind of review.
Great, exactly, and then we'll take it from there. So that's a great launch pad and starting point. So excellent, great presentation. We have some good feedback here, and I want to encourage everyone to please let us know what you thought. We're going to follow up again tomorrow with the recording of this webinar and the slide deck, so you'll have access to all of the materials to refer to at your convenience. So please let us know what you thought. And then next week, first thing next week, we'll reach out with sort of a special offer and start talking about if a review makes sense. So I think with that, that'll conclude our webinar today. And if we encourage you to check out our website and see what webinars are on tap as they relate to waste management and other topics here at Triumvirate. So thanks for participating. We appreciate the questions and your attention, and hope you have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.